Bob Lazar, Area 51, the whistleblower who changed everything a physicist claims, he reverse-engineered alien craft at Area 51. Decades later, his story remains unbroken and partially confirmed. Late autumn darkness settles over the Nevada desert in November 1989, when a silhouetted figure appears on KLAS TV in Las Vegas, identifying himself only as Dennis. Investigative journalist George Knapp conducts the interview with careful precision, aware that what this man claims will fundamentally alter public understanding of what occurs in the restricted airspace north of Las Vegas. The figure describes working as a scientist at a classified installation called Sminis 4, located at Papoose Lake approximately 15 miles south of the main Area 51 complex at Groom Lake. He states that he was contracted to study the propulsion system of disc-shaped craft stored in hangars built directly into the mountainside. 9 craft, he specifies. Technology that operates on principles fundamentally different from any known physics. Within weeks, the silhouetted man steps forward with his real identity. Robert Scott Lazar agrees to appear on camera, abandoning anonymity to provide the most detailed public testimony about alleged extraterrestrial technology study ever broadcast on American television. What Lazar describes sounds like science fiction: antimatter reactors, gravity wave amplification, propulsion systems that bend spacetime itself. Yet the specificity of his account, the technical detail he provides, and certain elements that prove verifiable years later prevent his testimony from being dismissed as simple fabrication. Lazar describes the Sminis 4 installation with extraordinary precision. 9 hangars built into the hillside at Papoose Lake, each designed to house a disc-shaped craft. The hangars, he states, have doors angled to match the mountain slope, camouflaged to appear as natural terrain from aerial observation. Inside one of these hangars, Lazar claims he worked on what he called the sport model craft, a metallic disc approximately 52 feet in diameter with a central column running through its core. The propulsion system, according to Lazar, operated on a fuel source he identified as element 115. This detail becomes significant. In 1989, the periodic table of elements extends only to element 109. Element 115 does not exist in any laboratory, any textbook, any scientific documentation anywhere in the world. Lazar describes it anyway. A superheavy element that produces antimatter reactions when bombarded with protons, creating a gravity wave that can be amplified and focused for propulsion. The element, he states, was provided to the Sminis 4 project in stable form, suggesting an origin beyond Earth's natural element formation processes. 14 years pass. In 2003, scientists at the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research in Dubna, Russia, successfully synthesize element 115 for the first time by bombarding americium with calcium ions. The element exists for only fractions of a second before decaying, but it exists. The International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry officially recognizes element 115 in 2016, naming it moscovium. Lazar's 1989 description of an element that did not officially exist until 2003 becomes one of the most puzzling aspects of his testimony. George Knapp pursues the investigation with journalistic rigor. His research confirms details that Lazar should not know if his story were fabricated. A 1982 Los Alamos National Laboratory phone directory lists Robert Lazar in the physics division. Colleagues from Los Alamos confirm working with him. Knapp locates documentation showing Lazar held a badge number consistent with contractors who worked at the Nevada test site. These confirmations do not prove Lazar worked on alien spacecraft, but they establish that he worked in classified government facilities in the capacity he claimed. Yet other aspects of Lazar's background resist verification entirely. He claims educational credentials from Massachusetts Institute of Technology and California Institute of Technology. Both institutions have no record of him as a student. No transcripts exist. No graduation records appear in any archive. No fellow students from those years remember him. Physicist Stanton Friedman, initially intrigued by Lazar's technical knowledge, investigates these educational claims and finds them completely unsubstantiated. This absence becomes the primary weapon used by skeptics to dismiss Lazar's entire account. Lazar attributes this erasure to deliberate action by intelligence agencies seeking to discredit him after he violated security protocols. The explanation sounds paranoid, conspiracy-minded, impossible to accept at face value. Yet documented cases exist of intelligence agencies removing employment records for personnel at classified sites. The practice, while extraordinary, falls within established patterns of how the classified world operates when controlling information about sensitive programs. The technical physics Lazar describes presents another puzzle. He explains the craft's propulsion system as operating through the amplification of gravity waves produced by element 115's antimatter reactions. Gravity amplifiers, he states, focus these waves to distort space-time, allowing the craft to move by pulling the destination toward itself rather than pushing through space conventionally. Mainstream physics in 1989 considers gravity wave amplification impossible. The Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory does not detect actual gravitational waves until 2015. Lazar's description of gravity manipulation technology remains unverified, yet his framework anticipates research directions that emerge decades after his testimony. Lazar describes being dismissed from his SMINUS 4 contract after bringing friends to observe test flights of the craft from a desert vantage point he had identified outside the restricted area. Multiple witnesses confirm these desert observations, describing seeing glowing objects performing maneuvers inconsistent with conventional aircraft over the Papoose Lake area on specific Wednesday evenings when Lazar said tests were scheduled. These observation trips, Lazar states, violated security protocols and resulted in his immediate removal from the program. Following his television appearances, Lazar describes surveillance and intimidation. Associates he identifies as connected to his disclosure pass away under circumstances he finds suspicious. He maintains a deliberately low profile for extended periods, running a scientific supply business called United Nuclear in Michigan while avoiding most media attention. The threat environment he describes sounds extreme, yet his behavior across 3 decades remains consistent with someone who genuinely fears consequences for disclosure. In 2019, federal agents raid United Nuclear with what George Knapp describes as unusual resources for a business search. Multiple agencies participate. The warrant extends beyond typical business documentation searches. Knapp interprets the raid as evidence of continuing government interest in Lazar that extends beyond his disclosed commercial activities. The raid occurs 30 years after Lazar's initial testimony, suggesting either ongoing official concern about what he knows or ongoing investigation of his activities. Documentary filmmaker Jeremy Corbell releases Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers in 2018, presenting the accumulated evidence and Lazar's most detailed testimony. The documentary examines what can be verified, what remains disputed, and what defies conventional explanation. Lazar himself appears calm, consistent, technically precise in his descriptions. He shows no signs of deception in his manner, though this observation does not constitute proof of truthfulness. The core account Lazar presents in 2018 remains unchanged from what he described in 1989. Across 35 years, through skeptical attacks on his credibility, through federal raids and personal consequences, his story does not alter in its fundamental claims. This consistency marks his case as extraordinary whether his claims prove true or false. Fabricators typically embellish over time, adding details, modifying narratives as they receive feedback. Lazar's account remains static, suggesting either genuine recollection or extraordinarily disciplined deception. Satellite photography of the Papoose Lake area, examined by independent researchers, shows terrain features consistent with Lazar's descriptions of the Sminis 4 facility location. Hangars built into mountainsides would appear as Lazar describes from ground level, while remaining difficult to identify from aerial observation. The specific geography he details matches what subsequent imaging reveals, though this correlation does not prove the facility's purpose matches his claims. The impact of Lazar's testimony on public consciousness proves undeniable. Before November 1989, Area 51 remains known primarily to aviation enthusiasts as a test site for classified aircraft. After Lazar's appearances, Area 51 becomes synonymous with alien technology, reverse engineering programs, and government secrecy about extraterrestrial contact. The term Area 51 enters popular culture directly through the publicity Lazar's testimony generates. Tourism to the remote Nevada desert increases dramatically. The small town of Rachel, Nevada, near the restricted area, rebrands itself around alien themes. The United States Air Force, which previously did not acknowledge Area 51's existence, eventually confirms the facility in declassified documents released decades later. Whether Lazar worked on actual extraterrestrial spacecraft, advanced human technology misrepresented to him as alien, or serves as an unwitting participant in disinformation designed to obscure conventional black programs, remains unresolved. Each explanation presents problems. If his story is complete fabrication, the question becomes why he fabricated technical details that proved accurate years later, and why he maintained the fabrication without alteration for 35 years despite personal cost. If his story represents disinformation, the question becomes why intelligence agencies would choose this specific narrative and this specific individual to spread it. If his story proves accurate, the implications challenge fundamental assumptions about human technological development and government transparency. George Knapp continues investigating and documenting Lazar's case across 3 decades, finding neither definitive proof nor definitive debunking. The case exists in a state of unresolved tension between verifiable elements and unverifiable claims, between corroborating details and missing credentials, between consistent testimony and extraordinary assertions that resist conventional verification. Bob Lazar's testimony remains the most consequential single whistleblower account in American unidentified aerospace phenomena history. It introduced concepts that shaped public discourse, named an element before its synthesis, and established the public image of Area 51 that persists into the present day. The subsequent confirmation of Element 115 as real, the documentary corroboration of his Nevada test site employment, and his unaltered account across 35 years prevent his case from being definitively dismissed. The mystery of what Robert Scott Lazar actually worked on in the Nevada desert in 1988 and 1989 remains one of the most documented yet unresolved questions in the investigation of classified aerospace programs and potential non-human technology. If you found this case compelling, subscribe to Vanishing Roads for more documented paranormal investigations from around the world. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented case files. All events reference real investigations and reported incidents.